control the slides, and then I'll turn over to him because he's going to use his laptop. He's talking. Good afternoon. Hello. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Nesbitt. I am Vice President for Institutional Opportunity and a professor here in hypertension. And it's my honor to welcome you today to our Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month celebration. We have a distinguished speaker today. Maybe you know him. I promise you it will be a fantastic day, and I know there are people still in line getting our lovely food lines, but I want us to get started so that we don't shirk on the time for the great presentation that we're going to have today. I want to just acknowledge a few of our leaders who have joined us today. Mr. Jeremy Falke here is our VP of HR. Dr. Elisa Hasty, who is our Vice Provost and Senior Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs and Career Development. Dr. Sherry Wong, who is our Vice Provost and Senior Associate Dean for Education. And Dr. Papu, there he is. Yes, he is Associate VP of Clinical Research Services. Thank you for joining us. So I wanted to just make sure everybody knew, well, why do we have Asian American Pacific Islander Month? Where did that come from? And if you didn't know, this was actually started out as a week in 1977-78, proposed to the president by Congress to expand it and continue that to be a permanent week. By 1990 or 1979, President Carter sanctioned it as a week, but by 1990, under President George Harold Bush, proposed it to be an actual month. And so why May? So May was selected because May 7th in 1843 is the date the first Japanese immigrants came to the United States. And May 10th, 1869 was the first transcontinental railroad in the United States was completed, and significant contributions were made to that by Chinese pioneers. So I thought that was just an interesting fact of why May is deemed to be that particular month. And as you all know, Asian Pacific Islanders cover a large component of the globe, really from the Mediterranean Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Actually, all of that in between is considered to be Asia. So we really are talking about a very, very large part of the world, and likewise, all of those different cultures within that part of the world have some unique differences, and celebrating part of that history that we can talk about today, but understanding that we're not going to be able to talk about all of it because there are so many wonderful things that we have to learn as part of that. Likewise, I'm so happy to see all of you here and look forward to seeing you every time we have these institutional events to celebrate who we are and to learn more about each other. With that, I will introduce our speaker today. Dr. Andrew Lee is our Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, Provost, and the Dean here at UT Southwestern. I know he's going to tell you much more about himself, and he's not really, he doesn't talk too much about him, but I want you to know how special and really just well known in the world he truly is. He is a specialist in plastic surgery, conducted investigations on vascularized composite allografts to ameliorate the need for long-term systemic immunosuppression. He started programs in hand transplant at Johns Hopkins and at the University of Pittsburgh prior to coming here. He performed the first double hand transplant in 2009 and the first above elbow arm transplant in 2010, and in 2018, his team, under his leadership, performed the world's first penis scrotum transplant on a wounded warrior. He's authored over 200 peer-reviewed publications, 40 textbooks, and given presentations all over the world. He's earned his degrees from Harvard in undergraduate studies, medical school, and general surgery residency at Johns Hopkins, followed by his plastic surgery training at Mass General. He joined us during the pandemic just before and came here and just has been a real lightning rod for moving forward our academic agenda, and it's my honor to introduce Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Dr. Nesbitt, for that introduction and invitation, and good afternoon. I'm delighted to take part in the celebration of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And Asian American and Pacific Islander represent a critical part of UT Southwestern workforce. For example, of our 3,700 faculty members, 30% are of Asian descent. And like all of you here and online, regardless of background, I am deeply proud of my heritage. And just as everyone has a unique life story, My experience and background have shaped my perspectives and career. So let me share my story. My father was a pilot in the China Air Force and flew a bomber against the Japanese invasion during World War II. He wrote a memoir at age 90 titled Blue Sky and Flying Tiger, recounting his career and family. We're proud of his military career. In 1940, he flew a risky mission to meet Chu Enlai from the rival Communist Party. He then followed Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek to Taiwan in 1949 after the Communists took over the mainland and was eventually promoted to the rank of Lieutenant General. Pictured here with my father, I was born and grew up at an Air Force base in southern Taiwan. I was the youngest of 5 in my family with 1 brother and 3 sisters, and my mother cooked spicy Sichuanese food for the family, which remains my favorite cuisine. My father had high expectations for me and wrote on a childhood picture of mine, quote, "Watch him straddle the lion today with 2 feet, wait for him in the future to seize the world with 1 hand." So in order for me to get a good education, my parents sent me to the US at the age of 15 to live with my siblings. As they were finishing graduate schools and taking new jobs, I moved around the country with my sister or brother and attended a new high school every year for 3 years. My first destination in the US was Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, a college town in the Midwest. There was no one else who looked like me at Urbana High School, and my prior English lesson had not prepared me to listen or speak. I remember my 10th grade class in American literature, where I could barely understand the teacher's words, and reading a page would take me an hour with a dictionary. And one day, Mrs. Tuchek wanted the class to participate in creative writing and asked the student to collectively write a story. So each student was asked to stand up and contribute the next sentence or paragraph to a free-flowing story. When it was my turn to stand up, I had no idea what had been said before me, and I could barely make out a coherent sentence on the subject. And as you could imagine, the initial puzzlement was followed by laughter by my classmates, and I was thoroughly embarrassed. I was a complete outsider in a foreign land with unfamiliar culture and novel customs, yet I was determined to fit in. To become proficient in English, I had to listen to each word carefully, then figure out what the speaker was trying to convey. I developed the habit of becoming an attentive listener. I spent a lot of time watching the evening news on TV because news anchors spoke clearly with a deliberate cadence to facilitate understanding. And for those of you who wonder why I have a unique speaking style, it is because I learned to speak English from television news. And I figured out the best way to communicate my thought is to speak in a cogent and succinct manner, the same way that Walter Cronkite did on CBS Evening News. So now for those of you who are too young to know him, Mr. Cronkite was one of the most respected journalists in his era and was even cited as the most trusted man in America. That was a very different era. And I was fascinated by the way he spoke, and I practiced many times his closing line at every newscast. And that's the way it is. Friday, June 7, 1973. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS Evening News. Good night. Furthermore, adjusting to new environments and customs made me appreciate the value in learning from people of different backgrounds and perspectives. I became accustomed to seeing things from other people's perspective and understanding why they see things differently and how they approach things another way. In hindsight, these necessary skills to adapt to a new culture and language in listening, speaking, and understanding different frames of reference have served me well in my career. My siblings and I did not have rich relatives or know people with influence or network in the US. During the early years, they owned no homes or significant property and moved from place to place for jobs after graduate school. When I went to college, each sibling would mail me a $10 check each month for living expenses. However, a realization from these formative years was that while I had no roots, no connections, and little resources in my new country, the finest universities opened their doors and gave me scholarships and education. A competitive system, for sure, subsequent opportunity for career advancement then became available to me, as they did to many of my colleagues and friends, regardless of our backgrounds or resources. And such availability of best education and jobs would have been inconceivable in other parts of the world. Our country is far from perfect, but I'm convinced it is still a land of opportunity like no other place on earth. During my education and training years, I encountered many talented and inspiring people, but everyone conducted themselves differently. If you can hear a lot by listening, according to Yogi Berra, you can see a lot by watching. So I developed the habit of watching people closely, particularly those in leadership positions, and took note of their positive traits and tried to emulate them myself. And these senior surgeons exhibited attributes that served as models for me. Dr. James May, Chief of Plastic Surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital, was my residency program director, then hired me for my first job. I have never encountered anyone more inquisitive and capable of asking probing and incisive questions. In fact, it's been said that a major benefit of training at NGH was to be able to avoid Dr. May having your board oral examiner. I became intrigued by his ability to probe and identify gaps, and had tried in my career to listen to every presentation on any subject with the mindset, what would Dr. May ask? Over the years, this habit has made me become more critical of any presentation and to ask questions that may expose deficiencies. Dr. Jim Strickland, an orthopedic hand surgeon who founded the Indiana Hand Center, was the lead surgeon of my hand fellowship. While I learned much about hand surgery from Dr. Strickland, it was his interaction with patients that left the deepest impression and affected my practice the most. Even pressed by a fast-paced clinic schedule, Dr. Strickland always communicated with the patient by looking into their eyes and related to them on a personal level that was seldom seen. I still remember how he spoke to a patient's wife after a back complication in the operating room with unmatched candor and sincerity. At the end of the conversation, I did not know whether she was feeling worse for her husband or for Dr. Strickland. The electronic health record has forced many of us to face the computer screen rather than the patient in the exam room, and I think we can all be better doctors by following Dr. Strickland's example. Dr. Tom Starzl, who pioneered liver transplantation, experienced high complication when he began to perform the operation. In fact, from 1967 to 1979, more than half of his liver transplant recipients died within the first year. The high mortality rate did not deter him, and the outcome of liver transplant steadily improved with greater experience and better immunosuppressive drugs. A true surgeon-scientist, Dr. Starzo also demonstrated dogged determination when pursuing the controversial subject of chimerism-induced tolerance. He encouraged our team at University of Pittsburgh to study donor marrow infusion in the laboratory to minimize immunosuppression for our hand transplant patients. Dr. Starzo was a staunch believer of science, undaunted by setbacks, and was a resolute and strong-willed optimist in pursuing his goals. And while I was fortunate in encountering these and other exceptional individuals in my career, it was the qualities and characters demonstrated by them in everyday action that served as models for me to emulate. Thanks to Dr. Starzo's encouragement, our team was able to establish a clinical hand transplant program at University of Pittsburgh and then at Johns Hopkins. At the time, military combat in Iraq and Afghanistan had resulted in many amputations of upper and lower extremities from IED blasts, which were not protected by body armors. Hand amputation is a devastating injury, not only from the inability to perform manual tasks, but because the human hand is used in social interactions and expression of emotion. And even with all the advances in prosthetics, they do not fully replace the multiple tasks of a human hand, including dexterity and the ability to touch and feel. The clinical hand transplant program established by our team required partnership with specialists who may not have worked together before, such as hand surgeons, transplant surgeons, various medical specialists, mental health professionals, specialized nurses, social workers, and hand therapists. The team could not be successful without seamless collaboration and critical input from each of its participants. During hand transplant operations, a large group of orthopedic surgeons, plastic hand surgeons, and microvascular surgeons worked together, with each specialty contributing its expertise for a successful outcome. Now, before I show images of hand transplant, a warning that certain images may be graphic and disconcerting to some. For those who don't want to see them, I will let you know when to close and open your eyes. This young woman lost parts of all four limbs from systemic sepsis and was left, as you can see, with a digit-less palm in her right hand. You may close your eyes if you wish. The level of her amputation allowed identification and repair of median and ulnar nerves at the distal portion of carpal tunnel and Guillaume's canal. Close harder. The hand allograft from a suitable donor was prepared for transplant with all anatomic structure delineated and tagged. The corresponding bones, tendons, nerve, blood vessels, and skin were then connected. You can open your eyes. And the hand transplant was completed. Hand therapy is critically important for functional recovery, and this patient worked with our therapist every day and regained wrist and digital motion quickly using her native forearm muscles. In 9 to 12 months, digital sensation returned as well as early function in this intrinsic muscle of the hand. This functional video of her transplanted right hand demonstrated one of the key advantages of a transplanted hand over prosthesis, because prosthetic users need to look at their devices and rely on visual feedback for usage. And this transplant recipient was able to utilize the natural sensation in her new hand and perform tasks that my female colleague tell me to be one of the most important activities of daily living. This bilateral amputee sustained a devastating injury when his arms were caught in the corn picker in central Pennsylvania, resulting in the loss of his left hand and the wrist level, a loss of most of his right forearm. He received bilateral hand transplants. On his left arm, we performed a transplant at the distal forearm level. On his right arm, however, because of the limited remaining forearm tissue for transplant, we made the difficult decision of recommending an above-elbow arm transplant, with the knowledge that he would lose a functional elbow joint if the transplant failed. This courageous patient asked us to proceed despite the risk, but told us just before the surgery that while he understood he could lose his remaining elbow joint, we could not, under any circumstances, compromise his Steelers logo. There he goes. As you can see, we followed the patient's wishes, and he became the first above-elbow arm transplant recipient in the U.S. Using his native bicep and tricep muscle, he quickly regained motion in his transplanted right elbow. And with nerve innervation of small intrinsic muscle in the transplanted hand and much hand therapy, he was able to perform manual activity considered demanding by some people. He's even offered to teach a few friends with normal hands how to use the chopsticks. Now, he invited our surgical team to his church at his 5-year transplant anniversary for a celebration, as you can see, of second chance at life. And in front of his congregation, he demonstrated his bilateral hand function as a part of church exercise. This video, taken outside his home, demonstrated fulfillment of our goals for hand and arm transplant to restore body wholeness by replacing what is lost, restoring both motor and important sensory functions as much as possible, integrate the limb replacement into activities of daily living, and particularly for bilateral amputees who requires assistance for dressing, eating, and bathing, our goal was to restore personal independence that they lose from requiring a personal attendant. As a final example, this brave soldier was struck by an IED in Iraq and was the first quadruple amputee survivor in the history of U.S. military combat. And while he survived the horrendous injuries, the lack of any limbs necessitated his reliance on his brother for dressing, eating, and bathing. After referral and screening, he was deemed to be an excellent transplant candidate. For his bilateral arm transplant, we started with 12 surgeons in 4 surgical teams, 2 teams for the right arm and 2 teams for the left arm. And each team prepared the donor or recipient limb for transplant with dissection and identification of individual structure while communicating continuously with the other team on the same arm about anatomic dimensions and tissue condition. These were the appearance of both arms at the end of the 14-hour transplant. Because prolonged time without blood supply could significantly damage tissues at room temperature, the surgical teams had to work expeditiously while maintaining precision in surgical execution. The tired yet elated surgical team at the end of the transplant procedure posed for a team photo in front of a U.S. flag that had been flown previously in Fallujah, Iraq, near where the patient sustained his injuries. The patient regained elbow and wrist motion about 9 to 12 months after transplant, followed by partial digital motion and sensation. With much perseverance and hard work at therapy over 2 years, his functional return exceeded our expectations. And when I first got this video, I immediately called him and said, "I did not give you permission to be here." Well, he was very proud because 2 weeks later, he sent me this video. Again, without permission from him. So making possible not only performance of activity daily living, but also retirement of his personal attendant. His brother was able to go back to work. So as evident by his facial expression before and after surgery, arm transplant for this wounded warrior resulted in a far better outlook on life. It was a privilege for me to be involved in this life-changing endeavor, and the lesson I learned was that a hand transplant program could not have succeeded without contribution of all team members with indispensable and complementary skills. And it is the same spirit of teamwork and collaboration that has led to the tremendous success and growth at UT Southwestern Medical Center, with now over 26,000 employees contributing every day to our missions. And Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have played a critical role in all corners and every aspect of our institution. So I want to thank each of you, regardless of background or heritage, for your unique and collective contribution. Thank you.
Oh my, wow. So even if you didn't look at the pictures, you heard the story. How amazing. And how amazing is it to have someone as a leader here who has really traversed that journey from humble beginnings through learning a culture that he couldn't even speak the language, and learning from Walter Cronkite. I like him too. And being able to really learn to communicate just is inspiring to all of us, and the level of work that it takes to really become a plastic surgeon with that level of detail. And I have always said, if I need plastic surgery, you're my guy. I'm gonna call you.
You don't want my kind of surgery.
Well, but I really respect the amount of work that you've put in. I was thinking of, proverbs from the Dalai Lama that really express kind of how I think of, Dr. Lee, the work you put in, and just how Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders have contributed to the world and to our campus. And this quote really stuck with me: is our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. I love that. But the qualities of leaders, the major qualities that the Dalai Lama professes are mindfulness, selflessness, and compassion, which I think are immaculately important for all of us in anything and everything we do. And Dr. Lee, you really manifest those in your work and your life here, and how you demonstrate to all of us how we should proceed. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that. So our second half of the presentation today is to talk a little bit about another aspect of how we can really improve our health and think about how to activate our bodies in a different way. Sifu Hedison Hui is a certified Chinese martial arts instructor with 25 years of experience, specializing in the Yang and Chen styles of Tai Chi, including various Tai Chi weapon forms. He's based in Carrollton, Texas. He offers a traditional Tai Chi program dedicated to promoting health, balance, and inner strength. As a cancer survivor himself, he's personally experienced the profound healing benefits of Tai Chi and the passionate way and he has a passionate way of sharing this transformative powers with others. We've invited him to talk to us a little bit today about Tai Chi and how he has utilized that skill to improve his health.
Thank you, Dr. Nesby. All right. It's a little hard to follow Dr. Lee after such an amazing presentation, but I'll try to do my best. Before I start, I want to thank Ms. Sweeney Law and the Office of Institutional Opportunities here at UT Southwestern. It's, of course, a pleasure and a privilege and a humbling experience, of course, to be amongst so many medical professionals here. So let me start with a little bit about myself. Of course, I'm a Kung Fu and Tai Chi instructor. I've been, in the area. My wife and I moved here about just over a decade ago, and of course, prior to that, we trained quite a bit and decided to bring kind of this art to the community, of course, with the hopes that we can also kind of spread awareness this beautiful culture that traditional martial arts brings. I guess a little bit, since we're talking about AAPA, a little bit about my background. I was born and raised in Venezuela. English is actually my third language, but my parents, of course, they come from southern part of China and Hong Kong. And of course, we actually immigrated twice, not only from Venezuela, but we also immigrated here. So, very similar kind of experiences as far as growing up in different cultures, learning new different languages. But anyways, that's, I'm very, very blessed to be here right now. Of course, I took a little different route as far as education. I still Asian. I went through the engineering route, so that's kind of my background. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I typically, of course, don't like to, talk too much about kind of my medical diagnosis that happened about 2 years ago. But I was actually here about 2 years ago with my wife. We're actually doing another consultation to see what we could do about my condition. I was basically diagnosed with mediastinal seminoma in my chest. It was a quite large mass. It was 7 by 5 by 3 inches. So it's actually pushing through my lungs. It was actually compressing my heart. So we didn't find that out. It just happened that I kind of fainted one day, and went to the hospital, and then they said, okay, you got to stay, right? So anyways, went through about 3 rounds of chemotherapy. For those that are in oncology, I went through 3 rounds of VEP. And of course, for you guys that know all the chemicals, B stands for bleomycin, which actually can affect your lung. It can have long-lasting effect in your lung, which is why we kind of came here to do a consultation, because once we did the chemo, the idea was for us to go through an open chest surgery to actually remove the remaining mass. But of course, praise God, we didn't go that route, and we're just monitoring from now on, basically. So anyway, so that's a little of my story. I think one of the things that kept me sane, of course, being in the hospitalized for at least 2 weeks, was actually continuing my practice with Tai Chi. To be honest, I wasn't as an avid practitioner until I had this condition, which kind of encouraged quite a bit of practice, and of course. One of the benefits I would say is not only on the physical side of things, which I'll show in my presentation, but also mentally, right? Staying sane and being positive. All this is kind of enhanced through the practice of the Tai Chi. And one story that I'll share with you as well. I had one of my Sihing, which is one of my older martial brother. Unfortunately, he's passed away. When I met him, he was actually diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma, and they only gave him a few months to live. And through the practice of Tai Chi, he was actually going through Moffitt, and he was a special case. Doctors were baffled. He actually lived, over 15 years after his diagnosis. So hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of kind of the effects that Tai Chi can have for your health. All right, so what I'd like to do today, of course, just kind of briefly talk about Tai Chi, what it is. Show of hands, how many of you guys heard of Tai Chi? Okay, not about how many practice Tai Chi? Oh, I got one. All right. Maybe you'll demo for me. No? Okay. Very good. Okay. So I'll talk about kind of the benefits associated with it, and of course, who is Tai Chi for, and hopefully I do have a link in my presentation. I don't know if Winnie's going to share that with you guys, or hopefully I provide you a resource that's actually medically backed, right? They've done a lot of studies, even though Tai Chi, of course, being very popular in Asia, of course, it's been more popularized here, and there's actually a lot of studies done by doctors here, that kind of give you and go through kind of the evidence of why people should practice Tai Chi. Okay. So what is Tai Chi? The way I like to describe Tai Chi, I like to call it as a meditation in motion, right? Very similar to yoga. It was developed in the 17th century, and believe it or not, Tai Chi came from a fighting art, and actually it is a fighting art, and of course depends how you apply it. So all the motions that you'll see me demonstrate later on, they're all based on kind of defend and attack type applications, okay? If you translate Tai Chi, it means ultimate fist. And they are typically four major styles are associated, the Yang, the Cheng, the Sun, the Wu, even though the Yang style actually is the softest one, the ones that probably the most popularized at this point in time. There are an estimate of over 85 million people practicing Tai Chi around the world. There's actually a Tai Chi World Day. I think it just happened recently in April time. But anyways, what is Tai Chi characterized by? Of course, slow controlled movements, a lot of breathing, of course, mind and body coordination, a lot of circular motions, of course, and the style itself is kind of rooted in a lot of Confucianism and Taoism kind of philosophies in it. So we can, of course, when I get too deep into that, but there's definitely a lot. That's a whole other area that we can spend a lot of time on. So what are the health benefits? Like I mentioned, I put in a link there. I think it's from PubMed, where they actually showed tests that they've done, and a lot of the benefits that you can get from practicing Tai Chi, of course, includes cardiovascular diseases, arthritis, joint disorders, neurological conditions, respiratory diseases, and so forth on. So it's very holistic. I think the important thing about Tai Chi and why it's it's so easy to get into is very low impact, low intensity, but it does encompass a lot of not only physical activity but a lot of mental. There's a lot of mental part to it as well. Like I said, moving meditation, right? So who's Tai Chi for? Of course, typically if you go to a park in China, you'll see a lot of older folks doing it. Of course, they're more invested in getting healthier, and that's a picture of that. But really, Tai Chi could be for anybody. You can, if you're a younger person, of course, Tai Chi can be modified in a certain way to make it even more challenging for certain folks. But then, kids as well, right? Of course, I don't think any kids here in the U.S. will probably be able to do Tai Chi. It requires a lot of patience and anyways. I have two kids myself, so they don't take Tai Chi from me, by the way. But anyways, with that, I'll leave some of my information. If you have any questions, of course, I'll stick around for a few minutes. But I'll go ahead and do a little bit of demonstration.
Wow, that really takes a lot of skill. I think, I thought maybe you might have us practice, but I see no. This takes a lot more than that, and so I'll have to do that at home. Thank you so much for joining us today to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month together. I so enjoy having time for us to come together as a community. A couple of days ago, we celebrated with some awards to individuals who've done wonderful things here. And Thomas Lee was our speaker, and he spoke about the social capital of a community and how that contributes to the excellence of the work that we do. That, you know, it is the buildings, but it's really the people, and it's the ability of us to share each other's experiences and work together in order to elevate ourselves and our entire community. And this is just one way that we hope this helps to elevate that social capital here at UT Southwestern. Please do us a favor and complete the survey by using the QR code above. It's always helpful for us to know how you feel about what we present and whether there are other ideas that you'd like for us to share in some of these institutional events. With that, I will close and thank you all for attending.